So tell me some of the interesting things you've seen in the Michigan neuroscience community and what has really sparked your interest.
Yeah, one of the things I thought about when I accepted the job to come to Michigan is somebody asked me when I was going, and I said, "This is a big job. There's lots of
Right.
parts to it. What gives you energy? Like, what energizes you?" And really, the thing that really kind of gets me going every day is that prospect of scientific discovery. And so it's really in these meetings where I've learned about all the opportunities there are at Michigan for interdisciplinary collaborative work that really is groundbreaking or transformative. That is the biggest thing I've taken away. And I would say so really the scientific excellence coupled with, and this is critical, it's almost like, think about the brain, we have those neurons, but then it's also the connections between the neurons that's important, right? And so what we really have at Michigan is that collaborative spirit. All the people I talk to, whether I'm talking about, sometimes I talk about my own research program with them and what are the opportunities, or I talk about their research program and try to start, as I learn more about research at Michigan, come up with those connections between people. And people, it just seems like everyone is willing to make those connections. So there isn't like some large sort of mental barrier where people want to stay off in their own silo. I just find that people at Michigan, it's almost been without exception in my meetings that people really want to find a way to work together. Now, I should just add, when I met with people, I approached the meetings as, hey, what can I do to help you? What can I do to make your, research program or, more exciting, more interesting? What's holding you back?
Right.
Because I'm here to help. And we get through that in like 5 or 10 minutes, and people turn it around and say, like, how can I help you? And so getting that kind of feedback it's tremendous, and I really feel like there's just going to be so many opportunities.
So that probably leads me to a natural next question,
Okay.
and that if you had to articulate then your vision for the Michigan Neuroscience Institute, like what is your vision? And if you sat here a year from now, what would have been your metric of success?
That's a
what
great
would you have
question.
said, ooh, I'm successful as the new director because this has occurred. So what's your vision, and like where do you see yourself a year from now? What's the metric of success
Yeah.
for this new institute
Great.
that we're all so excited about?
Well, let me try to take that on in like 2 parts.
Yes, definitely.
Certainly, like, I can talk about sort of the overall vision.
Yeah, I would like to hear that. I think we all would.
But I'm a very metrics person, so I've been thinking about that question quite a bit. But so in terms of like overall vision, what I really see the Institute trying to do is what I like to say is create an inclusive and diverse community, and I mean that in like many different dimensions. I think bringing together people who do many different types of research, many different types of work and science, bringing them together in a way that you remove the barriers to interactions. Secondly, I think we want to build the best interdisciplinary research teams, whether that's through recruitment of new faculty, whether that's through, for example, like we're contemplating things like challenge grants. And we really want not just to bring teams together to bring teams together. We're going to bring teams together to solve big problems. Many of those problems, many of those diseases, many of those mysteries of the brain that we talked about earlier. Let's put it out there. Let's say, hey, how can we address a big problem like Alzheimer's disease? How could we bring together the different tools? And how can we bring together people who may not even know that their work is relevant to neuroscience? Like there may be somebody in computer science who isn't really thinking about this problem.
Right.
How do we bring those people in?
I
right?
agree completely.
And then the third pillar, if you will, of my vision is really building the research infrastructure, whether that's the next generation of trainees, whether that's the next technologies that we're going to need to really get at that resolution that I talked about earlier. And then lastly, it's really, I think Michigan is already great in neuroscience. how do we elevate our visibility? How do we make ourselves known both internally, but also externally to, again, a diverse audience, whether it's other scientists, but even the public? How do we communicate that to what we're doing here at Michigan? Now to the second part,
Yes.
the metrics, and we're talking about a year from now, so we're
Right.
not going to be able to
1
do all.
year, no.
We're not going to do all of
And
those
then I'll
things.
ask you
all,
5 years too.
Okay, all at once. Okay, I got it. I'm planting that seed. Thank you. But I'd say in this particular
Right.
year, I think where my focus is one, learning.
Right.
So for me, I'm going to just continue on this listening tour. I think I counted 60 meetings that I've had already in the first.
Have you really?
Yeah, with
Thank
deans, institute directors, faculty, postdocs, graduate students,
Fabulous.
staff, and many more on my schedule to come, many more important meetings. So just continuing to learn. And learning is both meetings, but it's also going to be like learning about what are the funded programs at Michigan, what are the different areas, and even meeting folks, like I said, who might be outside, like meeting departments, department chairs or departments that are not nominally consider themselves neuroscience. The other area that I want to really push is recruitment. So part of this position and part of building, I think, the best teams is like, okay, we have our team, but I don't know if I'm allowed to use a sports analogy at Michigan.
You can
You know,
definitely.
we might need a quarterback, or we might need a left tackle, or something like
Right,
that on our
right.
team. So I hope to as I learn more about what we have at Michigan, think about key players we could bring in who help fill out that team or elevate the performance of our teams to address these kind of big questions. So I think recruitment is going to be a big area. One thing I just have to acknowledge is, there's significant funding for recruitments coming from the Biosciences Initiative at Michigan, which is a university
Right.
level program that will help support some of those recruitments. And of course, we also have substantial research space in the North Campus
Yes.
that we will have the opportunity to recruit into. So really building that as a interdisciplinary team, almost in and of itself, if you will, that really helps to address some of these big questions. It's an unusual opportunity, unique opportunity, I should say, and one that really attracted me to Michigan, because at most places, and even many parts of the Michigan campus, space is a premium.
Yeah.
And so really, someone leaves and we
Right.
just like, oh, we recruit this person, we
Right.
just put them in that
Yeah,
spot.
Right.
This kind of more open space that we have on the North Campus is really an opportunity for me and for us collectively to think strategically about how we do recruitment and who we put next to who, and how do we build those teams to be, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
And the nice part also about the NCRC is the really strong bioengineering
Yes.
that we have, and the biointerfaces
Yes.
program that has a long, rich history
Yes.
of collaborating with the neurosciences,
Yes.
and that'll be great value
Yes,
added.
absolutely, and
Be-
that's been great.
Before I ask you to tell me 5 years from now, you mentioned students, and we have I'm a graduate of the neuroscience PhD
Great.
program here at University of Michigan, and we have a long-standing neuroscience PhD program. Does that then now become part of the institute, or is that a program that stays like multidisciplinary? What is your vision for that program?
Yeah, I think, first off, I think the institute has a very close relationship with the graduate program. So I think there are many joint, like the neuroscience conference we had is recently, and just before I arrived, but we'll continue to have it in future years, is really a joint effort. So there's many kind of collaborative efforts
I see.
between.
So it's going to be a synergistic relationship.
For sure, it's synergistic,
Perfect.
but I think my hope is that we can continue to build on that, and what the eventual structure of that is, whether it's part of the institute or not, I haven't quite gotten my hands around that yet. So, but for sure, the relationship's gonna be close, and I think part of that revolution in neuroscience is also going to be a revolution in the training of neuroscientists.
Yes, I agree.
Because ultimately, the institute is really about people, right? It's really about the people in the institute, and the people we train is critical for the next generation of research that's going to be important for groundbreaking discoveries.
So my last question,
Okay.
5 years from now.
Okay.
Okay, that's a big ask.
It is a big ask.
It's a very big ask. Geez, though, your vision's great. Your vision's big, and let's say we can really realize it under your leadership. 5 years from now, what would we look like?
Well, I think we're going to have more neuroscientists at Michigan, and I'm going to say
Love it.
we're going to have great neuroscientists at Michigan. So I imagine we're going, and we're already in discussions about recruitments, and so I don't know what that number is going to be, but I believe it's going to be a pretty significant number of new neuroscientists at the University of Michigan. But more importantly, it's going to be the quality of work that emerges from that. So as we think strategically about the people we bring in, it's going to be building new interdisciplinary research programs. And so that will be evident if we want to be metrics driven. What new grants are we going to get? Are we going to be competitive? One of the most common comments I've heard on the listening tour is like, we've got great neuroscience here at Michigan, but we haven't really been competing as much for some of the large federal and private foundation grants. And we want to be more competitive with that. For a lot of those require finding 4 or 5 investigators who work on some common topic. How do we bring those people together? And so I think the Institute will serve, if I may say, to lower the barriers, to facilitate those interactions, to help us be competitive for those types of programs. And 5 years from now, success will look like we've secured additional grants in those types of areas. So having those new grant programs. And then more important even than the grant program is going to be the discoveries, is the science, is the impact on health and disease, right? So hopefully, obviously one of the currencies of academic research is going to be publications. Obviously, we're going to look at that and the impact of those publications. It could be in inventions, so whether we talk about patents that emerge from this work. So those are some of the ways that I hope we can measure what we're doing.
So I'm not sure everyone knows what the Michigan Neuroscience Institute is. Could you explain it to us?
Yeah,
what are the building blocks? A, B, and C, please.
One thing I just have to mention about Michigan and neuroscience, and will help answer your question, is Michigan was one of the first, if not the first place that had an interdisciplinary institute devoted to neuroscience. It was the Mental Health Research Institute was formed nearly 70 years ago. And then that transformed into the Molecular and Behavioral Neuroscience Institute.
True.
And that was co-directed by Stan Watson and Huda Akil. And I just have to give a shout out to Huda, as she was recently awarded the National Medal of Science from Joe Biden in the White House just a few days ago. It's a tremendous honor for her amazing research on the neurobiology of emotion. To talk about the Michigan Neuroscience Institute, I really have to talk about something that's I think quite unique to the history of neuroscience at Michigan, and that is that Michigan had probably one of the first interdisciplinary neuroscience institutes in the country, if not the world. And that was the Mental Health Research Institute, formed nearly 70 years ago. That ultimately transformed into the Molecular and Behavioral Neuroscience Institute, which was co-directed by Stan Watson and Huda Akil. And I do feel a need to give a shout out to Huda Akil, who was awarded the National Medal of Science for her work on the neurobiology of motion in a ceremony at the White House. So it's something to really be proud of, neuroscience research at Michigan. Now, very recently, they stepped down, and what was called MBNI transformed into MNI, Michigan Neuroscience Institute, where I have now become the executive director. And really, the scope of the institute changed along with the name change. So
you're the inaugural. You're the first director.
Yes. Although before I jump into it, I really want to make sure I mention a debt of gratitude both to previous directors, but certainly Huda and Stan have done a phenomenal job of setting me up for success. And of course, Hank Paulson and Shelley Flagel were the interim co-directors, I think, for a couple of years, which is kind of hard to do that job for so long. And they've really did a tremendous job. So I'm coming in, hitting the ground running with the great work that's been done previously.
Another sports analogy.
Yes, I will not end with the sports analogies if you let me do it. So where are we with MNI? We're talking about, when we think about, it's really been converted to really a cross-campus university-wide program. It is based in the medical school, and we're talking about nearly 150 faculty, nearly 30 departments, 6 different schools and colleges. So we're talking about something with a very broad scope. And I say those numbers with, it seems like on a regular basis, I'm getting emails of people who want to join. So those numbers are going to continue to rise. So
Don't you think that's just fabulous?
That
is so exciting for us.
That is tremendous. So really the mission of Michigan Neuroscience Institute is really to bring these people together. It's really to catalyze interdisciplinary collaborations to really make those groundbreaking discoveries that we wouldn't be able to solve, for example, on an individual lab level or on the individual department level or individual school level. And I make the argument that the complexity of the brain is so large that this is where an institute can make real impact, because we can put together the teams on a scale large enough and deep enough that we can address these what have been really, really challenging problems.
Now, certainly there's a virtual aspect to the Institute because there's so many departments, but am I also understanding there's bricks and mortar to the Institute now too, new bricks and mortar than at the NCRC?
Sure. Yeah, there was, as part of that original MBNI, we still have an MBNI building on campus, so that's definitely one of the major hubs, if you will, for neuroscience. And really, yes, there's also, as part of my recruitment, there was additional space in the North Campus Research Complex. And really, that's going to be one of my tasks, one of my jobs, is really going to be to build up that as kind of a major neuroscience hub at the University of Michigan.
And so for our listeners to even better understand then this both virtual and real-time bricks and mortar Neuroscience Institute, it's based at the medical school, but there are also, as you said, lots of departments around campus. What are some of the major other departments that are part of the Neuroscience Institute?
Sure. So we can talk about, so first off, I think probably the major schools we're talking about are like literature, science, and arts, the School of Engineering. There's other schools as well. I don't want to leave anybody out.
Right.
But I would say obviously our strength in life sciences, whether that's the molecular cell developmental biology. We have a phenomenal psychology department with a great biopsychology program. I'm just learning more and more about it. We obviously have the Life Sciences Institute on Central Campus. And then the School of Engineering, I think, is really where there's could be a lot of activity, because engineering is kind of where a lot of new technologies are being invented. And sometimes they're not invented necessarily with the brain in mind, but yet they can be applied, whether that's new imaging tools, new ways of sensing things in your body or in the brain.
Right.
And of course, the whole area of computation, right? So we know that things like artificial intelligence are going to have a major impact in our ability to apply those tools to problems in neuroscience. I think is going to be pretty dramatic. So I think bringing all these people together, that's going to be the challenge.
It's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
You're going to have quite a team.
Yes.
I'm really excited you've joined us
Yes.
at Michigan Medicine / University of Michigan. And I think you're going to have a great time here. Everyone's very excited about your arrival. So welcome again, and come see me on your learning and listening tour.
I would love to do that.
Perfect. Well, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.